Congresswoman Sidney Cumlager Dove, representing California's 37th Congressional District, is a dedicated advocate for justice and families. With a background in community work during the 1992 riots, she has focused on community advocacy throughout her career, serving on the Los Angeles County Commission on Children and Families and the Los Angeles Community College Board. Elected to the California State Assembly in 2018 and the State Senate in 2021, Cumlager Dove achieved legislative success. As a freshman member of the U.S. House of Representatives, she brings extensive experience from her service in Los Angeles, remaining a steadfast advocate for justice and the well-being of vulnerable community members. Assemblywoman Lori D. Wilson, elected in April 2022 to represent California's 11th Assembly District, encompasses Solano County in parts of Contra Costa and Sacramento counties. Before her Assembly tenure, Wilson made history as the first black female mayor of Solano County, demonstrating fiscal responsibility in promoting housing, jobs, and diversity in Suisun City. In her first year and a half in the Assembly, Wilson has sent 11 bills to the governor's desk, securing millions in state funding for her district, addressing issues from housing to electric vehicle infrastructure. Angela V. McKnight, elected as the first African-American Assemblywoman for New Jersey's 31st District in 2015, is a prominent figure with diverse roles and achievements. As Chairwoman of Aging and Senior Services, Vice Chair of Women and Children, and an Assembly Deputy Majority Leader, she actively contributes to legislative committees. Angela is also the founder of the nonprofit Angela Cares Incorporated, dedicated to advocating for seniors and mentoring youth. Beyond her legislative duties, she owns Care About You, LLC, offering consulting services for the elderly, and is the CEO of Thank Her Now, LLC. Angela is a published author, carepreneur, producer of the Thank Her Now podcast, and creator of impactful training courses. Her extensive community involvement, including partnerships with various organizations, showcases her commitment to community service. Assemblywoman Shavonda Sumter, serving in the New Jersey General Assembly since 2012, holds leadership roles as Deputy Speaker and Majority Conference Leader. Representing the 35th Legislative District, she chairs the Community Development and Affairs Committee, addressing issues like community blight and the wealth gap. As the first woman to lead the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus, Sumter advocates for job growth, women's health, voting rights, civil rights, and criminal justice reform. Camila Moore is an attorney specializing in entertainment and intellectual property law, also recognized as a reparatory justice scholar. Moore contributed to human rights reports on various issues, including racial inequality in Brazil, the human right to sanitation in Alabama, USA, and the human right to remedy for indigenous black women facing racialized gender violence in Papua New Guinea. She delved into the intersections of international law and reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade and chattel slavery, culminating in a master's thesis. Moore holds a Juris Doctor from Columbia Law School, a Master of Laws in International Criminal Law from the University of Amsterdam, and a bachelor's degree from UCLA. In 2021, she was appointed to the California Reparations Task Force. Carmen Nicole Cox is the Director of Government Affairs for ACLU California Action. A law professor, devoted mentor, and energetic advocate for more than a decade, Carmen has been dedicated to engaging, empowering, and activating the next generation of freedom fighters and liberation attorneys. Max Parthas is a highly accomplished spoken word artist, slavery abolitionist, and social justice activist. With a lineage of artistic social changemakers, he has been named National Poet of the Year twice and received prestigious awards for his activism. Max is the acting director for the Paul Cuffey Abolitionist Center, national campaign coordinator for the Abolish Slavery National Network, and executive producer of Abolition Today. He played a pivotal role in organizing significant national prison slavery work strikes, removing slavery exception clauses from several state constitutions, and introducing the Abolition Amendment to end constitutional slavery. Dennis Febo is a multifaceted individual as an educator, community organizer, artist, and the CEO/founder of Guazabara Insights, LLC. Originally from Brooklyn and a New Jersey resident for 2 decades, he holds a master's degree in humanities interdisciplinary from SUNY at Buffalo, University of Havana, Cuba, and Federal University of Bahia, Brazil. Featured on TED Talks in 2016 for his work on identity, language, and practical applications, Phibo is a professor at NJCU in health sciences. Since 2010, he has positively impacted incarcerated individuals by creating a cultural and social consciousness education curriculum, fostering self-knowledge and self-actualization within the justice system. Jamelia Land, a Bay Area native, serves as the director of post-election campaigns for ASNM. A devoted mother, a prominent criminal justice activist and co-founder of ASAP. With a primary focus on the mental health and well-being of children and families impacted by police and community violence. Exemplified by her role on the Sacramento County Public Safety and Justice Agency Advisory Committee. She actively addresses critical issues encompassing the management of jail populations, enhancement of social services, implementation of diversion efforts, reduction of recidivism, mitigation of racial disparities, optimization of countywide efficiencies, and the combating of gun violence. Chris Lodgson is a lead organizer with CJEC, the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, and ARCC, the American Redress Coalition of California, which are grassroots, California-based organizations working for reparations and reparative justice for descendants of U.S. chattel slavery living in California. CJEC is one of 7 community organizations selected by the California Reparations Task Force to conduct community outreach and engagement for reparations. CJEC helped write the final version of AB 3121, the law that created California's first-in-the-nation reparations task force. Joel Quirk is a professor of politics at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. His research focuses on enslavement and abolition, gender and violence, historical repair, and the history and politics of Africa. Joel is the author or co-editor of 8 books, the most recent of which is entitled Research as More Than Extraction, Knowledge Production and Gender-Based Violence in African Societies, Ohio, 2023. Joel was a member of the Yale Working Group on Modern Slavery, 2017 to 2018, a rapporteur of the UNESCO Slave Root Project, Resistance, Liberty, and Heritage, from 2011 to 2020, and is a founding editor of Open Democracies Beyond Trafficking in Slavery.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you all so much for joining us here. We have a powerhouse group of panelists and a limited amount of time to hear from these thought leaders and activists. So I'm going to stay on script. Good morning and welcome to Advancing the Abolition Agenda, a national and state perspective. Today's webinar is a pivotal gathering of minds and voices, uniting federal and state legislators, legal experts, activists, and scholars in a collective mission to dismantle the remnants of involuntary servitude in our nation. Our journey today traverses the vast landscape of abolition efforts, from grassroots to the grand halls of legislation, spotlighting the strides we've made, the hurdles that lie ahead. We stand honestly at a critical juncture in our shared history, where the echoes of the past meet the resolve of the present, driving us towards a future where freedom is truly inalienable. We commence with a panoramic view of the slavery abolition movement, tracing the arc of progress across states and the federal sphere. Our dialogue will illuminate the recent legislative victories that mark our path, celebrating the advances while acknowledging the work that still remains. A focal point of our discussion will be the California Reparations Bill package, specifically Assembly Constitutional Amendment 8, also known as ACA 8, the End Slavery in California Act. This landmark legislation not only seeks to amend historical wrongs, but also serves as a beacon for justice and equality, offering a blueprint for the nation. We will also be speaking with New Jersey state legislators on their state efforts to end legalized constitutional slavery. The shadows cast by forced prison labor, as unveiled in the recent investigative report by the Associated Press, demand our urgent attention. Today, we'll confront these revelations head on, deliberating on the imperative for sweeping reforms within our entire criminal justice system. And then lastly, we'll delve into the Federal Abolition Act, a comprehensive proposal to eradicate involuntary servitude in all its guises across the United States. This act represents a bold step forward in our unyielding quest for the true abolition of slavery. As we navigate these critical topics, let us engage in open, meaningful dialogue, forging alliances and action plans that will propel us closer to our ultimate goal, the absolute abolition of all modern forms of slavery. Thank you for joining us in this vital conversation. Together, we move forward, united in purpose and in passion. I would like to
Good morning, everyone. Please pardon me, I'm having some slight technical issues. Thank you, Carmen, for jumping in there. My name is Jamelia Land. I am the Director of Post-Election Campaigns with the Abolish Slavery National Network, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar. We are getting ready to roll into a quick video that we would like for you all to take a look at so that you can have a further understanding of some of the conversation that we're going to be having today. It has been put together by the Associated Press. Charmaine?
A hidden, intricate web links hundreds of popular food brands to work done by U.S. prisoners. A 2-year Associated Press investigation found that everything from grains, meat, eggs, and milk had been grown, harvested, or produced by incarcerated people. And their labor finds its way into the supply chains of some of the most recognized brands and largest food companies in the world. We followed as cattle raised at the Louisiana State Penitentiary were transported to a meat processor in Texas. From there, the beef ended up in the supply chains of McDonald's, Burger King, and major grocery stores.
I felt like I had become a slave, a product of the convict system, because everything that I was doing was profiting the prison.
The 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. We spoke to prisoners who were working on the same plantation soil where slaves toiled more than 150 years ago. Many were making pennies an hour. Some were getting nothing at all. Others were being contracted out to private companies or taking part in work release programs. Prisoners can sometimes be punished for refusing to work, even thrown into solitary confinement.
Because anytime you bump it,
And if they are hurt on the job, they often have little recourse.
they aren't eligible for workman's compensation, nor are they protected by other worker safety laws because they're not considered quote-unquote employees.
We're going to have to figure out different ways to make our system a better system instead of just exploiting labor and then calling it crime prevention.
The agriculture sector is just a fraction of the overall prison labor industry, which includes everything from public works to stamping license plates.
They're learning a skill set. They're learning to be responsible for something. They're learning to pay back their debt to society.
Watch the ship. I learned that if I wanted to be better, I have to make my own way, basically. That the opportunities are here. They're not going to give them to me.
But prisons and corporations benefit from inmate labor. The goods wind up in the supply chains of giants like Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, and Costco, just to name a few. The AP also found American prison labor linked to the supply chains of multinational companies such as Cargill that export goods all over the world. This is happening even though Washington has banned imports and seized goods that were produced by prison or forced labor abroad.
And DHS is deeply concerned by credible and growing reports of China's state-sponsored use of forced labor and other human rights violations in the Xinjiang region.
Several companies told the AP they have policies in place restricting suppliers from using incarcerated workers. Cargill acknowledged buying goods from American prison farms and said it would determine next steps. Others said they would look into the AP's findings, which revealed just how much prison labor touches many of the foods we eat.
Wow. Seeing that makes me feel compelled to tell you that I join you here today from Sacramento, California, land that is situated on the unceded traditional homelands of the people of the Miwok tribe. And I'm compelled to say that, to make this land acknowledgement, because the vast majority, as we just saw, of North American wealth stems from stealing native land and then enslaving African. Today, we are about the business of discussing the path to true abolition and repair. So, as I said, we're going to hear from remarkable leaders. There will be time for question and answers at the end. No matter how you are joining us today, you may send us your questions, which will be monitored by the amazing Anya and Charmaine behind the scenes. So, without further ado, I will welcome members of the executive team of ASNN. I will start with Dennis Fabo. As director of the Hudson County Credible Messenger Movement and president of the New Jersey Credible Messenger Movement, Dennis leads a cooperative of 45 social organizations. Additionally, as the founder and co-director of state operations of ASNN, Dennis initiated the Amend the 13th movement in New Jersey, advocating for the removal of the federal exception clause and the inclusion of anti-slavery language in the state constitution. After we hear from Dennis, he's going to pass the mic to Max Parthis. As we've heard, it was mentored by poetic activist legends and leaders of the Black arts movement, including Amiri Baraka. Max is a multi-published, multi-recorded spoken word artist, slavery abolitionist, and social justice activist. In addition to being named National Poet of the Year twice, he is the recipient of the Missouri Cure Mark Taylor Activism Award, the Will Bell Humanitarian Award, and the In the Spirit of Malcolm X Award. Max's decades-long volunteer work includes serving as National Campaign Coordinator for ASNN. I'm going to turn it over to Dennis and Max. Welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, beautiful family. My name is Dennis Febo, lead organizer with the Abolish Slavery National Network. With one of my most closest confidants and colleagues and homies in the world, that's Mr. Max Parthis. I'm here to introduce the Abolish Slavery National Network, which we founded almost 4 years ago by unifying movements from different states who were all on the same page about knowing that this needed to end. Slavery should no longer exist, not on the federal scale, not in any of our states, not in our constitutions. If we say we are the land of the free and the home of the brave, we are the land of justice, slavery has no permission being any of our documentations as citizens and residents of this country. So a couple of years ago, as we started the movement in Jersey, Colorado ended up stepping up. And in 2018, Colorado became the first state to remove the exception clause from their state constitution. And as we all started to talk to each other states joined on board, which then in 2020, the states of Utah and Nebraska ended up abolishing slavery in their constitutions. And then as we move forward to 2022, we have Vermont, we had Tennessee, we had Alabama, and we had Oregon, which finally leaves the state of Rhode Island, which was the only state in the Union to have actually permanently abolished slavery, putting us at 8 states on the map. And now we have over a dozen of other states who have on-the-ground campaigns, who are on the same page with abolishing slavery in this country. And the Abolish Slavery National Network was formed and incorporated to assist local movements on the ground to learn how to campaign, learn how to put what language, and learn how to foster support to get this bill onto a ballot as a constitutional referendum so that the people of those states can finally vote to end slavery in that state. As an organization that moves to end constitutional slavery, we understand that it's also the movement to end all of its badges and all of its incidents as expressed in law and in society. The Abolish Slavery National Network not just entrusts itself with ending slavery on the constitutional level, practices, and all of its forms. And we do that by enacting our state operations movement. So I would like to introduce Brother Max Parthis to explain to you what we do.
Peace. Thank you, Dennis. At this moment, we have over 18 states, including Washington, D.C., organized to remove slavery exception clauses from their state constitutions or to provide anti-slavery language in the states that do not have any language. Prior to 2018, 25 states had exception clauses similar to the 13th Amendment. Some were even worse, like Georgia, where you could become state property for contempt of court, or Vermont, where you could be state property if you did not pay a bill or the like. 25 other states had no language at all, like New Jersey and Texas and Vermont, or not Vermont, New Hampshire. So as Dennis mentioned, we've already removed those exception clauses from 7, and we have 18 of them organized on the ground to do more right now. I would also like to give a big shout out to Robin McDowell and Margie Mason, who were the authors of the Associated Press video that you saw earlier. It's also an article that goes greatly in depth into the issues. But I would like to point out that what they're focusing on is primarily just agricultural, and that was mind-blowing in itself. But slavery goes far beyond just the agricultural aspect. People are making goods and products sold on the open market across the globe. There's also the issue of warehousing bodies, where it's all about possession of one's body. Like in New York, for example, at Rikers Island, if you're incarcerated there, it's at a cost of $563,000 a year, which is not really a cost at all. It is an incentive to incarcerate more people. There's a slideshow that's coming up, and I want to make some comments about the Associated Press's article as we show this slideshow. Some of the mind-blowing things that you're seeing here in these images is convict leasing. Convict leasing was allegedly ended in 1928 after over 120 some odd Black men, women, and children were killed in a cave-in Alabama. The world was in an uproar about what we had been doing. Convict leasing is the missing link between chattel slavery, where individuals get to own people, and state-sponsored slavery, where the state owns people. This article went in depth to some of the issues that are occurring in the United States and abroad here today. And they brought receipts with them. Some of the ones that stand out for me was the image in Hickman's Farm, where inmates from Arizona prisons had been sent to Hickman's Farm to stay on the premises, to literally live on the premises and work for pennies on the dollar. Convict leasing was supposed to have been abolished. So why are there inmates living on Hickman's Farm, a commercial company, and working for pennies on the dollar? And while they were there, they were still being forced to pay rent for living in the prison, being exploited in that way. Also, during the article, we saw that they followed some of the vans and the trucks for hundreds of miles. But at one point, they went to a place called the Myrtle Plantation, where 2 Black men were let out to go inside to wash the dishes on this plantation, former slave plantation, which is now a wedding venue and a tourist attraction. So they dropped them off there to go wash the dishes on a slave plantation before they took them to the next place. We also saw in this article and through some of the imagery where inmates were being taken to places like McDonald's, where they don uniforms and work for the day so that they can go back home in the evening to a prison. Uh, Convict leasing is supposed to be abolished. It's supposed to be illegal. But yet, right here, through the efforts of Robin McDowell and Margie Mason, we saw the receipts of what has been happening. This is still occurring all across the United States where convict leasing is being used. It is not supposed to be there at all, and yet the receipts are available for anybody that wants to see. And of course, as I said, we live in a country that has the largest prison population that's ever existed on planet Earth. And that's roughly over 2 million people incarcerated right here, right now. And there's a lot of racial aspects of it as well, always has been. For instance, in America, we have more Black men who are incarcerated in cages built for human beings than the top 5 populated African nations do combined. And they have a collective population of over 600 million. And yet we still have more Black men behind cages and working in fields and on and on and on. So that's what I want to say about the Associated Press issue. And I'll go ahead and pass it back to our host. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Max. We want to be informed, and we're going to remain, while the much of the state of affairs is discouraging because it's dehumanizing, we will remain encouraged and stay in the fight. And speaking of staying in the fight, I'm super excited to introduce our next 2 speakers. The first is Camilla Moore. Camilla is an attorney specializing in entertainment and intellectual property law, also recognized as a reparatory justice scholar. During her law studies, Moore contributed to human rights reports on various issues, including racial inequality in Brazil, the human right to sanitation in Alabama, and the human right to remedy for Indigenous Black women facing racialized gender violence in Papua New Guinea. While at the University of Amsterdam, she delved into the intersections of international law and reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade. Her work culminated in a master's thesis on the Atlantic slave trade and chattel slavery. Ms. Moore holds a JD, Juris Doctor, from Columbia Law School, a Master of Laws in International Criminal Law from the University of Amsterdam, and a bachelor's degree from UCLA. You thought that was impressive, and it is. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Chris Lodgson. Chris Lodgson is a lead organizer with the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, CJEC, as well as the American Redress Coalition of California. These are grassroots organizations working for reparations and reparative justice for descendants of U.S. chattel slavery living in California. In fact, CJEC helped write the final version of Assembly Bill 3121, which created the California Reparations Task Force. And more recently, they just celebrated the passage of SB 189, which made California the first state in the nation to require its state agencies to collect data specifically for descendants of U.S. slavery. Chris is a political advocate for Sacramento Black-owned businesses and an entrepreneur who runs Sacramento County's media and marketing platform for local Black-owned businesses. One more thing. In his day job, Chris is the community organizing and policy manager for the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, which is an organization that empowers formerly and currently incarcerated people to thrive by providing a support network and reentry services. I will turn it over to attorney Camilla Moore and activist Chris Lodgson.
Hello. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I just have some short remarks, and I'm looking forward to Chris's comments and the rest of the discussion. As announced, my name is Camilla Moore, and I serve as the chairperson of the First in the Nation California Reparations Task Force. Over the course of 2 years, from June 2021 to June 2023, our 9-member task force held hearings, some virtually and in person, across the state of California, studying, and not only studying, but also developing comprehensive reparations proposals for African Americans, those who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. Our work culminated in the production of a 1,100-page final report with over 100 recommendations. Our role as an official state commission, we were to advise the legislature on the types of proposals that they should adopt into law. And so one of our recommendations, in fact, were to end slavery in prisons. This is an issue that I am personally passionate about. I've done prison abolition work, particularly in college at UCLA, led a successful campaign to get the UC to divest their shares in Wells Fargo because of their role in private prisons. And so, again, this is an issue that is very near and dear to my heart, particularly because I also have family that have been impacted by mass incarceration and over-policing. I will say I was in a panel yesterday on reparations, and one of my colleagues, who I have differences with, but she said something really important. Dreesen Heath, who's a human rights researcher, yesterday, she made some comments and some real critiques about the California Reparations Task Force and our recommendations, namely around, the recommendation of ending prisons from an abolitionist, ending slavery in prisons. From an abolitionist perspective, we know that that can't be the only recommendation, right? We know that we can't just stop at ending slavery and voluntary servitude in prisons. We know that the entire system needs to be abolished. And to that end, I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir there. The other part that I wanted to add before I close is, just to make a quick comment, yes, we need to make sure that this legislation passed. It's a necessary step, I think, to abolition, right? But at the same time, I want to also hold up that it doesn't go far enough. And I'm sure maybe Chris will mention this, for descendants of slaves who have been, and I'm talking about the California Legislative Black Caucus bill priority package. It doesn't go far enough in the bills that they presented in assisting descendants of slaves, particularly those who have been impacted by mass incarceration and over-policing. For instance, the California Reparations Task Force, we hired 5 economists, including the late William Spriggs, who passed away a month before our final hearing. And he was a dean of Howard economics at Howard University. And so I say all that to say we hired 5 economists because we took the mandate seriously to recommend reparations recommendations that fully comported with international human rights law standards. So under international law, reparations comes in 5 forms, right? Compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. And so when you analyze the bill to end slavery in prisons under the context of international law, you could say that falls into a form of reparations like guarantees of non-repetition. The state is guaranteeing to stop harming the victim group by closing that loophole that exists in the Constitution. However, when we think about particularly Black Americans who have been impacted by mass incarceration and over policing, and I'm sure Chris can talk about this in his work, right? How Black Americans, their recidivism rate is extremely high, right? And partly is because when they come out of prison, they don't have any resources to really sustain themselves. And so the California Reparations Task Force, in our work with these 5 economists, we recommended compensation as a form of reparations for proven state-sanctioned atrocities, for proven atrocities that our economists compiled data to show that there is state culpability for. And so those 5 state-sanctioned atrocities include health harms, devaluation of Black businesses, housing segregation, but then also it includes mass incarceration and over-policing. So I just wanted to be clear, because there seems to be some confusion in the media. The California Reparations Task Force recommended reparations that fully comports with the 5 forms of reparations under international law, including compensation. And we also made the recommendation that Black Americans who descend from slaves are owed reparations in the form of compensation for the state's role in mass incarceration and over policing, which is still happening today when we see the governor deploying resources to increase funding to prisons and police. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and I'm just happy to be in community, and this is a great start. Thank you.
Good morning. Wow, that is a tough act to follow. And I want to give a big shout out to my right honorable friend, Chair Camilla Moore, and of course, the esteemed panelists and activists and people that I look up to be quite honest, here who I am in their presence today, and I have the privilege and honor of being in their presence. As folks have mentioned, Chris Larson, lead organizer, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. As mentioned, we helped write the law that created the California Reparations Task Force, the final version of the law that is. We were one of the 7 community partners with the State Reparations Task Force. We worked on reparations recommendations, and now we're working on reparations legislation. I won't go too much into the bio and all that because we've already done that. I really want to spend some time educating folks and getting folks excited about the movement to end current slavery going on, particularly in California state prisons. And as you have heard, all across the country. And big shout out to the whole Abolish Slavery National Network, Dennis and Max and the family all over the country. I see y'all. We appreciate y'all. We are successful because you are successful, and you are successful because we are successful. And the only way we're all going to be successful in ending current slavery going on here in California and across the country is if we're working together like we are. And this is a great way to do it. And I am also going to say, and this is something that Chair Moore alluded to, and I think it's very important right now to hear some words. And Carmen, our great moderator, you tweeted something like this, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, and you were reading my mind because I was thinking the same thing. It's actually something that I gave and said in testimony on a previous version of this effort to the California State Senate as we were considering a bill to end slavery in California prisons. Let me say it like this. If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. If you pull it out all the way, that's not progress. Progress is healing the wound that the blow made. And they haven't even pulled the knife out, much less heal the wound. Of course, those are the words of our great ancestor, our teacher, our brother, Malcolm X. And this is very important to what we're discussing today, because current slavery is still going on in California state prisons. Current slavery currently is still going on in California state prisons. What we are doing is ending slavery and pulling the knife out of our backs and the backs of our brothers and sisters. That's the first thing that we're doing. What has to come next, of course, is actually healing the wound. And there's a lot we can do. And the State Reparations Task Force made some great recommendations about how we compensate folks who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States for things like mass incarceration, over policing, which in my thoughts include forced enslavement and involuntary servitude in our state prisons. Very important recommendations from the State Reparations Task Force. And we've made the case for several years now that ending slavery is not reparations. Ending slavery is ending slavery. Reparations and the healing comes after you stop the thing that you need healing for. And that's the point that we're making. And it's very important and I want to say this to my reparationists out there across the country. If you listen, watching, appreciate you, of course. This move and this work to end current slavery is very connected to our work to do and achieve reparations. Part of the work that we're doing is to end the current slavery going on right now, and also to repay, compensate, repair, and heal, and make progress among those who are descendants of persons enslaved in this country. I'm gonna say one last thing before I turn it back to our esteemed colleague and friend, attorney Carmen Nicole Cox. But I just want to say thank you again to everyone who has been fighting this fight and who is fighting this fight right now as community organizing and policy manager at ARC, Anti-Recidivism Coalition. We are in the prisons every single day. We are in the juvenile halls every single day. We see firsthand the impact of what enslavement and involuntary servitude does to our people before they come home and after they come home. And in my capacity as lead organizer with CJEC, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, what we're working to do is to make reparations happen specifically for these individuals, for those who are descendants of persons enslaved in this country. I appreciate y'all. Carmen, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
And like our good friend LeBron James, I think I'm going to pass a dime to our leader, Miss Jamelia Land, who's going to introduce an amazing, amazing, amazing speaker.
Thank you, Carmen. So please pardon me, everyone. I have had technical issues all morning, but I want to say again, welcome to everyone who is here. And my name is Jamelia Land. I am the director of post-election campaigns with the Abolish Slavery National Network. And it is my humble honor and pleasure to introduce one of the most dynamic human beings that I have ever had the pleasure of working with and whom I consider a great friend, our United States Congresswoman, Sydney Kamlager Dove, who represents California. And before she comes on, I just want to say that she is truly a champion for the people. Last year, while she was transitioning from California State Assembly to the Senate and ultimately going to the United States Congress, she fought and she championed for our bill last year, which was ACA 3. And so we are so pleased to have her here and to join us. Congressmember Dove.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Jamelia. And thank you for inviting me to come today to speak to all of you all. I want to give a shout out to my sister in the assembly, my former colleague, Lori Wilson, who is the chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. And I am certainly hoping that they will champion ACA 6 across the finish line this year. The reason why I want to continue to honor Jamelia is because, truthfully, she didn't really know me. And she came to me with her husband's heart and passion and her connection to this amazing movement and said, we need a champion. You know, we need a champion in the Senate who will do this. And I thought, oh my God, what a layup, you know, to take slavery and involuntary servitude out of California's state constitution, especially when you have states like Mississippi and Louisiana that have already done this. This will be such an amazing extension of the work that we have been trying to do in the criminal justice space. But never did I ever imagine that in the progressive state of California, Democrats would refuse to pass this bill. And never did I ever imagine that they would be so incensed that a Black woman had the audacity to carry it and tell the truth in committee and on the floor, that they felt the need to refuse to take it back up. And never did I ever imagine that of all the bills that Department of Finance could try to torpedo, of all the bills that actually do cost money, that they would have the indecency to write a letter saying, getting rid of slavery will cost the state too much. A few weeks ago, there was an article in the LA Times about reparations and this work and your work. And one of the architects of the assassination of ACA 3 said, and I quote, "I was concerned about eliminating the word slavery in the Constitution without any detail on how it would be implemented in our prisons and would take power from the legislatures to courts." And I have kept this quote in my phone to remind me that even in 2024, the language is still the same as it was in the 1800s. Why do we need to justify taking slavery out of the Constitution? Why do we have to quantify how getting rid of slavery will be implemented to make sure that colonizers, plantation owners are okay? I mean, that's what the Civil War, that was what that was all about, right? Let's make sure that the South is okay with giving Black people humanity. Will it be okay for our bottom line? So in 2024, we're still having that discussion. And it appalls me. So I am so grateful that in spite of my efforts, you all are moving forward with ACA 6. And I hope that the failure of ACA 3 continues to give you ammunition and power to speak truth to the power that's in the legislature and remind them that this is still slavery. Why was there an Associated Press article just last week that talked about prison labor? Our men and women in prisons making products for Walmart, for Target, for Kellogg's. You know, Tony the Tiger would say, that's not great that you are paying people pennies to create products that we are selling for dollars and dollars and dollars and not paying fair wages. Why is it that in certain prisons, thankfully not in California, but nonetheless here in the United States, that you still have people, mostly Black men, picking cotton in a prison, being monitored by wardens on horses with whips? So ACA 6 is important because it is a linchpin to the work we are doing at the federal level. And when I was in the state legislature, I, supported the work that Senator Murkey was doing on this issue. And when I got here, I immediately signed on to the federal legislation along with my colleague, Nikema Williams from Georgia, to say we are going to work on amending the 13th Amendment because we need to be part of this eventual ratification. And the ratification happens when more states, including California, do this. Right now, for me, it is a black eye that we haven't been able to take this out of our Constitution. It silences me on the floor because I cannot even say that I've been able to match the work of some of my colleagues in southern states. It's also incredibly important that California continue to be bold and that you advocates push this legislature. You have to push this legislature and this state administration on reparations, because the country is watching what we do. They are watching to see if we will fail, or they are watching to see if we will stand up in our power and move the needle when it comes to reparation. As Chris talked about, when it comes to true healing, acknowledging the damn truth. And if you watch anything that's happening on the floor, you see that the majority of those in Congress, the Republicans, don't want to talk about this. They still call us colored people on the floor. They still reference slavery as a good thing. They are afraid of our power. And your resilience, commitment, persistence, truth, your movement scares them, as it should, which is why it is so incredibly necessary that you keep leaning into the work, because it is clear to me that the prison system is totally in bed with the large corporations to figure out ways to continue to keep us poor, to continue to make money off of our bodies, and to continue to deny us the humanity, the dignity that we deserve. Because even right now, today, in California, if you go to CDCR's website, you can find RFPs, you can find contracts that they are reviewing and soliciting with companies to use their labor. And corrections is touting their cheap and available labor pool. Our family members incarcerated, it is on their websites. Contract with us. We have free labor, and we can make them work for as long as you need. It is the same thing that is happening in our federal prisons because of the 13th Amendment. It is why they were sneaky enough to sneak in, with the exception of the punishment of a crime. And we have to call them on it. So I am incredibly grateful that you are not staying silent, that you are taking this to the streets, to the legislatures, to the state capitals, and to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And I need you to know that I am here with you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness, Congresswoman, thank you so much. We speak often as advocates and activists about speaking truth to power. We are so grateful to have a representative of power show up and speak the truth. Thank you for joining us. We are going to invite another elected official who's also doing the work of trying to liberate our people. We like to welcome Senator Angela McKnight from the great state of New Jersey. Senator McKnight was elected as the first African-American Assemblywoman for New Jersey's 31st District in 2015. She's a prominent leader. She's formerly Assembly Deputy Majority Leader. She's also the founder of the nonprofit Angela Cares, Inc. She's the owner of Care About You, LLC, and CEO of Thank Her Now, LLC. So many folks have benefited from her dedication to improving the lives of seniors and youth. Senator McKnight is a published author, a carepreneur, a producer of the Thank Her Now podcast, and has been sponsoring legislation since 2020 to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude in New Jersey. She is a respected mentor, an educator. She served in the New Jersey legislature for nearly a decade and has received numerous awards for her community work. We thank you so much for joining us, Senator McKnight.
Hello. Hi. How are you doing? That was a beautiful introduction, and I appreciate you. Right now, I am standing in our State House. The New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus is having our annual event where we are looking at policy and we're talking to advocates about how we can move the needle forward. So I appreciate the time that you are allowing me and my colleague to talk to you about the Amendment 13. I want to commend the Congresswoman for your words and for your action and for your support. And we know that our Senator Cory Booker, is working in the other house to make sure that we see Amendment 13 abolished. I've been working with Dennis Febo. He is a hard, supportive advocate, and he brought this issue to light to me. I did not know that slavery still exists. And when I read the Constitution, I said, wow, what can I do about this? And I've been working since 2020 on this legislation. My forever senator who passed away recently, Ron Rice, he had it in the Senate. And now that he is an angel up in heaven, I have the baton to work on it on the Senate side. And I have a wonderful colleague who has taken the hymn to work on it on the Assembly side. We have to continue to talk about slavery. We have to continue to uplift our people who's in jail, who's being coerced to continue to work for free labor. When they are released, these same companies will not hire them. But now that they're incarcerated, they have already been sentenced. And now this is a double sentence. Yes, I understand that they are supposed to work. They have to be rehabilitated. And I'm sorry for the noise in the background, because again, we're in the State House. But they should not be coerced to be forced to work. So I stand with all the states, especially California, for fighting this fight. And here in New Jersey, I will continue to fight the fight to make sure that we see Amendment 13 truly eradicated. I've gotten new language from Dennis Febo, because Dennis is all around the state, and he is that advocate who's bringing me back information. And I will be introducing this bill alongside my colleague from the Assembly side, and we will continuously work hard to make sure we see this. So any questions that you have for me or my colleague, please feel free to reach out. We have to do this together. Yes, we're sitting in the seats, but we need people such as yourself to start raising the roof, to start taking off the roof until we get slavery gone. So I thank you so much. And any questions that you have, please feel free to reach out. I'm sorry that I cannot stay, much longer because we're in this retreat, but I just wanted to come on and just share with you. New Jersey is on the right side to eradicate Amendment 13. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator McKnight. And thank you, Dennis. The fight requires our solidarity, requires our persistence, requires our dedication. And I'm extremely honored to introduce our next speaker, who has epitomized fight and dedication here for us as our champion for ACA 8 in California. I'd like to introduce to you Assemblymember Lori Wilson, the author of the End Slavery in California Act. Assemblymember Wilson holds historic roles, including being the only Black woman appointed chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee here in California, and the very first freshman legislator to lead the California Legislative Black Caucus. Notably, she openly discusses being the parent of a transgender child, emphasizing her commitment to defending vulnerable communities. Assemblymember Wilson's track record includes policies for job creation, community safety, improved quality of life, all reflecting her dedication to serving her constituents, Californians. We are extremely proud to have Ms. Wilson here this morning to talk about her work, not just on ACA 8, but as a shepherd for the California reparations bill package. Assemblymember Wilson.
Well, good morning to everyone and good afternoon for those that are across our nation. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to be here with you today to talk about important issues such as ACA 8, ending slavery, not only in California, but hopefully across the nation, as others have shared, as well as, California leading the way on reparations. First of all, let me thank Congresswoman, I was going to say Sydney because that's how I know her, but Kamlager Dove, for her work on this, as she noted, on the original ACA 3, and Senator Knight, go in New Jersey. We are with you. We are here for you for whatever you need to help get that across the finish line in your house. ACA 8, or ending slavery, crystallized really early when talking about reparations, this thought to repair the damages of the years of generations of discrimination, as well as, the stain of slavery. It came out early. And so, as noted, Congresswoman, then Assembly member, introduced this legislation to change it in California. And usually California is a leader on issues like this, but we are behind the ball. We were behind the ball before it was introduced a couple of years ago, and we are behind the ball now, which is really sad. We like to say all the time that we're on the right side of history, but right now we're at the bottom. It's unfortunate. And it's terrible that we are still here, and still, as the Congresswoman noted, that we are still having this conversation about the cost of changing the law, the cost of changing our Constitution, to saying that slavery and involuntary servitude is prohibited, to putting a period at the end of that sentence. We keep having conversations in the legislature about the cost of it. But we have to think about human dignity. That just because I am incarcerated, and we all know not everybody who's incarcerated should be incarcerated, but just because I'm incarcerated doesn't mean I lose my right to be dignified, to have human dignity. And that's what's happening in our state, is that incarcerated individuals have a loss of so many rights. And they're experiencing slavery, as it was said. Because we have that exception in there, except for punishment of the crime, we found a loophole to allow slavery to exist in California, a free state, and had always been a free state. Now, we've had slavery, don't get me wrong, but we were created as a free state, and we still have slavery today for incarcerated individuals. And so that's why this fight is so important. And the fight is not just about ending slavery, but really is about reparations, and that thought process that, the root word of that is to repair our communities and repair our families through these generations of discrimination. And so that's why it's extremely important that we get this across the finish line. It's currently came out of my house in the Assembly. It's now in the Senate. We'll be going to committee very soon, now that the chairs of on the Senate side, those chairs have been established, and we have a new chair who will be overseeing this. And I look forward to good conversations with her on this subject to ensure it gets out on the Senate side. But I'm really excited about being able to do this work, and finally, hopefully finally in 2024, it gets done. it gets done and makes it across the finish line here in the state of California, because it is extremely important that we are not left behind. And when I say we, that Californians are not left behind in this conversation, that it shouldn't be that we have to wait. I had a colleague say to me, well, why don't we wait to see what the feds are doing? And when the feds do theirs, we can ratify. No, we've never taken a back seat to hard problems, to complex issues. We've always been the leader. And what's sad is this is not even complex and hard. When you talk to voters, they believe that slavery should not exist, that involuntary servitude should not exist. But yet and still, at the top levels of our government, we're having these conversations. So I look forward to working with all of you to get this across the finish line in California, to ensure that at every committee and when it's on the floor, that we have people there standing in solidarity and letting our legislators know that this is not going to go away. They are not kicking a can down the road, that they have to deal with it this year. And as was noted, this came out early in our reparations conversations when we did the reparations task force and had the historic report that came out. This was crystallized very early in the conversation. And so this is a part of that. And I look forward to, as we finally got into the policy, instead of it just being policy statements that came out of the task force report through cooperations with the DOJ, it's now finally time. It's in the legislators' hands to have action. And so I'm excited about this work as well that we've just begun, putting it into action, putting the recommendations into actual policy, to legislative and budget priorities for our legislators to sign on to. And so our first thing is our resolution, which details the harm, and it's the acknowledgement from the legislature that harm has been done to Californians of African descent, those that have experienced the vestiges of slavery. And as we get through that, we have our apology, which was signed by the governor, and it's the formal acknowledgement that harms were done and that something needs to be apologized for. And then we move into all the policy changes and all the investments that need to happen in our communities and directly to individuals. Once that recognition is made from both the legislature and formally from our top governor, the top, which is our governor, and look forward to bringing this over this multiple years reparations and watching the lives of Black Californians change and be transformed through the policy work that we're embarking on. And we all know that when you touch Black Californians, you touch every community. So California will be better because of it, because of the work that we're doing and because of the impact that we're making on the lives of Black Californians. But it has been an absolute honor to be with you all today. I look forward to continuing discussions in this space and be able to move forward in a meaningful way of taking off the stain of racism, of slavery, of generations of discrimination, and being able to allow someone born in the state of California to be born into a new world, because you created that new world for them. And I hope that we can move back into our position of leadership so that we can help transform the rest of the nation and be a lead in this area, and as well as give Congresswoman Kamlanger Dove the ability to stand boldly on the floor and say, not only am I representing California, but California is with me in making change across our nation. Thank you so much.
Right. I appreciate you, Assemblymember Wilson, keeping us fired up. We are not only looking forward to the actual healing on the other side of the acknowledgement, that is the actual investments you're speaking about, the actual policy changes. We're not just looking forward, we are going to move it forward. We are here 10 toes down. We're going to stand in solidarity. We're going to be out front. We're going to be in the back pushing. We're here. And you know what? We're doing it all across the state. I'm actually really excited to introduce to you all another legislator from the great state of New Jersey, specifically Assemblywoman Shavonda Sumter. As the first woman to lead the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus, Assemblymember Sumter advocates for job growth, women's health, voting rights, civil rights, and criminal justice reform. She was first elected to the New Jersey Assembly in 2012. She has served as Deputy Speaker and Majority Conference Leader, and currently chairs the Community Development and Women Affairs Committee. That committee addresses issues like community blight and the wealth gap. Notably, she successfully sponsored legislation on Black maternal and infant mortality, restored voting rights for over 80,000 individuals on probation or parole. Assemblymember Sumter holds an MBA from Farley Dickinson University, has a background in mental health services, currently serves as the president and CEO of Children's Aid and Family Services. She is undeniably committed to her community and family, and she's here with us today, this morning on our side, afternoon on their side. Assemblymember Sumter, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Carmen, for the warm introduction. Thank you to my sister and colleague, Senator Angela McKnight, for inviting me to this Zoom. Thank you to each of you for finding interest in this most critical topic. It is Black History Month, Black Excellence Time. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, which requires that we continue to lift up the mantle, move the torch forward to abolish slavery and involuntary servitude. My work here in the legislature has been for over 14 years working on reparative and restorative justice. I hold the Reparations Task Force bill, and congratulations to California, thank you. But I introduced that bill first, and much to my chagrin, California has passed it, helped their task force, are working towards reparative justice. I'm struggling here in New Jersey, and I'm fighting the fight, and I keep leaning in at the table each session for this important bill because New Jersey was a big part of the northern slave trade, where we had land taken from us. And the importance of passing the Reparations Task Force bill is that the generations that were harmed will soon no longer be with us. They will soon no longer be with us. 400 years and counting. Enough is enough. Being sure that we're taking away and abolishing involuntary servitude through our penal system has to end today. Equity, fair wages, livable wages. Those are the things that we're fighting for, not only as Shavonda Sumter, but also as chair of the Black Caucus in partnership with the advocates. I'm going to support the bill and sponsor the bill in the Assembly House here in New Jersey with Senator Angela McKnight. And we are going to put a spotlight on language that often gets lost because we're not reading the fine print. Enough is enough. I look forward to working with each of you, and thank you for putting a spotlight on this very important topic. And I'll pass it back to Carmen.
Thank you so much from across the nation. I love seeing it. The solidarity is real. It's needed because, as the Assemblywoman just said, enough is enough. Speaking of enough, we're coming to the end, but we do have, before we get to Q&A, we have an amazing speaker who's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the work that he's done. This is Professor Joel Quirk. And Professor Joel Quirk is a professor of politics at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. His research focuses on enslavement and abolition, gender and violence, historical repair, and the history and politics of Africa. Professor Quirk is the author or co-editor of 8 books, the most recent of which is entitled Research as More Than Extraction, Knowledge Production and Gender-Based Violence in African Societies. Professor Quirk was a member of the Yale Working Group on Modern Slavery, rapporteur of the UNESCO Slave Route Project, Resistance, Liberty, and Heritage, and is a founding editor of Open Democracies Beyond Trafficking and Slavery. Thank you so much, Professor Quirk, for joining us today.
Thanks, Carmen. I have to confess I'm incredibly inspired to learn about all of the work that's been going on in different states in the United States and collectively within the nation as a whole. It's remarkable just how much energy and activism has been kind of devoted to the question of slavery and its legacies. So in this context, I want to speak briefly to you all about a key theme in my work, which is how the history of enslavement and legal abolition can be connected to practices today. So I'm going to dive into this question of how we might think about defining slavery and how a definition of slavery might be applied. So my starting point, if I can have my first slide, is for thinking firstly about the disconnect between the legal abolition of slavery and what I've described in my work as larger questions of effective emancipation. So I don't need to tell you all this, but it's been very easy to declare the problems associated with enslavement to be solved or resolved simply by dint of the passage of legislation, or in the United States, the passage of constitutional reform. So my question, if I can have my next slide, relates, back please, relates to the question of what counts as slavery once slavery has been abolished as a legal institution. And this is a question that has a legal issue where if you want to charge someone for enslaving someone else, you need to have an understanding of the elements of crimes associated with enslavement as a legal institution. But it's also a political question because it's very easy to white-ant conversations around slavery where questions about whether something is really slavery come kind of quickly and easily in context where there's a strong social and political impulse to try and push slavery as far in the past as you can, even though we know, of course, that its afterlives continue in various forms. So in my work and in this presentation, I want to take you through an answer to the question of what counts to slavery in the aftermath of legal abolition. And I want to set this up by firstly thinking about a couple of ways in which the label of slavery might be stretched or diluted. We know that there's rhetoric associated with slavery as a category. We can talk about wage slavery. We can talk about slavery being applied as a label for all kinds of things. And this runs the risk of creating suspicion about whether anything can be really defined as slavery. And also, and I think crucially in this context, there's a risk that indiscriminate references to slavery can dilute or sideline histories of enslavement and their racialized legacies. So here I follow Adele Blackett in insisting that slavery is not simply a metaphor. It's not something that should be lightly applied to any number of different things. It needs to have weight and meaning. And then secondly, I follow Lindsay Butens, who published a book with Duke University Press recently, pointing to the risks in having slavery applied indiscriminately such that it links up to white savior narratives of rescue associated with all kinds of different issues. And Butens' argument is that sometimes work associated with human trafficking can displace and marginalize questions around racial justice. So it's in this context, my question becomes how to credibly define and apply enslavement. And I want to suggest here that slavery cannot be everything, but it also cannot be nothing. So in my next slide, I have a brief account of what an answer to this question might be. So as part of a larger conversation around how slavery looks from a legal perspective, some colleagues and I want to stress that this is not only my work. There's a series of historians and activists and so on who contributed to these guidelines. We looked at how slavery is defined in law, and we particularly looked at the idea associated with the 1926 Slavery Convention, which the United States, like many other states, has ratified, which understands slavery as the status or condition of a person over whom any or all of the powers attaching to the right of ownership are exercised. Now, this definition is important for several reasons. It firstly gives us an answer to the question where slavery cannot simply be de jure in law or policy. It needs to be understood as having de facto dimensions. So when we talk about powers attaching to the right of ownership, we can talk about powers that are exercised even if they aren't formally recognized as enslavement in law. And what this means in de facto terms is that there will be situations where powers are exercised even if they are not formally described and classified as being enslavement. And what that means is when looking to see whether something meets the threshold associated with enslavement, we can't simply take the word of the people who describe certain categories as not being slavery. So, and in my final slide, the key predicate condition here is the idea that slavery can be defined in terms of powers attaching to right of ownership as constituting control over a person in such a way as to deprive them of their liberty, intent to exploit, use, manage, profit, transfer, or dispose of that person. So what this definition gives us, or at least what I hope it gives us, is an understanding that slavery exists in fact, even if it isn't recognized as such in law. And crucially, this is a definition of slavery that's being used for the purposes of criminal prosecution. So the International Criminal Court, under the terms of the Rome Statute, uses this definition of slavery to convict people of it as a criminal status. And the most recent example we have of this is the case of Dominic Ongwen in Uganda. So for my purposes, I want to suggest that powers attaching to the right of ownership can and should be applied to the circumstances of many, but not all, of the people subject to the prison industrial complex. And here, I also want to briefly end by saying it's a mistake under this definition to understand slavery as an individualized relationship between an enslaved person and their enslaver. Slavery historically was both an individual relationship and a collective status enforced by the state through surveillance and violence. And similarly, in the United States today, we have to understand this as a product of state policies, a product of state systems, and a product of private and public partnerships, all of which involve a collective dimension. And then finally, we can't simply reduce powers attaching to right of ownership to people being forced to labor for no pay. So enslavement is horrifying. It involves incredible amounts of physical violence, but it's a mistake to only look at bodily suffering over the less visible, yet still massively harmful psychological and social effects of enslavement. So slavery is not simply a system of extreme violence and terror. It's also a system of extreme subordination and discrimination that places extreme restrictions on movement, community, work, and family. So slavery is still monstrous even without extreme bodily suffering. And it's in this context we need to understand the prison industrial complex as involving violence and exploitation and marginalization that go beyond simply work for no wages. It's a totalizing system, much in the same way that racialized slavery in the United States was a totalizing system. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Quirk. We would certainly agree. Slavery is much more than just about wages. In our current systems, what we see is that folks don't have the ability to call off sick. People don't have the ability to say that work assignment is too dangerous. They don't have the ability to say, I would rather spend my time focusing on education or vocation. They don't have the ability to say, I can't go to work today because this is the best day for my family to come and visit with me, right? So when we're talking about slavery, we're talking about the inability of people to withhold and or withdraw their consent to have their labor, their skill, their talent used for the benefit of someone else. That's what we're trying to end with ACA 8 in California. In short, we're trying to end state-sanctioned robbery of primarily Black labor. And we appreciate all of you joining us today. Our good leader, Jamelia Land, is going to close us out. And I just want to say a couple of words about Jamelia. She's come on the screen a couple of times, but we haven't formally introduced her. Jamelia, as she mentioned, is Director of Post-Election Campaigns and Co-Director of State Operations. Her advocacy focuses on criminal justice reform, supporting incarcerated individuals, and combating police brutality. Jamelia has played a significant role in legislative coalitions, including ACA 8, contributing to major reforms such as the End Slavery in California Act and the California Act to Save Lives. Her commitment extends through her work with Edify and as a National Survivor Fellow with Everytown for Gun Safety, which aims to end gun violence. She's driven by her own personal challenges, including her son's wrongful charge. Jamelia's grassroots activism and lobbying efforts make her a powerful voice for the marginalized, advocating for mental health, criminal justice, and restorative justice rights. I'm going to say thank you all so much. It's been an honor to be here with you. You can find me at ACLU California Action. Jamelia, please close us out.
Thank you for that, Carmen. You have done an amazing job. And I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible because this has been an amazingly robust conversation. First of all, I would like to say that Black History Month is every month, but today I am exceptionally proud to see all of the Black women that have shown up in this space today, from U.S. Congresswoman Sidney Kamlager-Dove to our CLBC chair, Assemblymember Lori Wilson, to Senator McKnight, New Jersey chair, Legislative Black Caucus chair, Shavonda. Thank you to all of my fellow co-founders at the Abolish Slavery National Network. So there's just a few things that I want to run through real quick. I want to say that, and we cannot forget Ms. Camilla Moore. Thank you so much for all of the hard work that you have put in. So this year, the Abolish Slavery National Network, we are proud to announce that the states and statuses for January of 2024, we have 18 states in addition to the federal Senate Joint Resolution 33, which is a federal joint resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to prohibit the use of slavery and involuntary servitude as a punishment for a crime. As so many of us have been taught, the fallacy that the Emancipation Proclamation, in fact, ended legalized slavery. It did not. It merely reconditioned it, as the 13th Amendment states, and so many of our respective state constitutions, that slavery nor involuntary servitude shall be permitted except for punishment of a crime. California is right along in there with that exception. And so this year's 18 states, California, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Arkansas, Michigan, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, Virginia, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, and congratulations, shout out to New Hampshire. They passed their first committee unanimously, Missouri, Iowa, and DC. And so again, I'd like to give a shout out to everyone around the country who has been actively participating in the true abolition of slavery in this country. And I just want to say that we made mention of California's reparation bill package, and there has been a lot of conversation amongst the public in regards to the bill package not including a monetary compensation. And what I would like to say is that I implore everyone in the state of California and throughout the nation to keep your eyes on legislation such as ACA 8, right? Because though the bill package may not include a dollar payment for each person or descendant of someone who was enslaved in this state, I think it is very important to note that California is one of the largest carceral states in the union, that we have modern day plantations built into our prison systems right now. If you don't mind, I'm going to have an interactive map put up on the screen real quick so that I can show you in real time what is actually happening. This map comes from the Associated Press, recently released investigative report. This map you can find in their article. And as you see, all of the highlighted green dots on the screen or on the map show facilities around the country that are actively participating in some form of economic exploitation. As you can see here in California, we are producing some of everything from eggs, milk, cheese. We are slaughtering animals, and all of these things are being directly fed into major corporations, not just here in the state of California, but around the country. And so I implore you all to make yourself knowledgeable about what is actually happening around this country and in our beloved state. Though California entered the state as a quote unquote free as a free state in the union, let's be very clear that the legislators of the time, and some currently, still believe that California should be a state that continues to exploit Black and brown bodies for the mere purpose of continuing to maintain the economic infrastructure. We have an entity here called CalPIA, which our amazing Congresswoman Sydney Kamlacher mentioned earlier. And she stated that there's information on CalPIA's website. I also want to let you know that CalPIA has a board that is structured very much like a corporation. And this is a little frightening. The board is structured like a corporation. The chair of the board is also the director of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, who also goes by another name entitled the Secretary of CDCR. This person is appointed by our Governor Gavin Newsom. And so I think that it's important for people to understand that last year, ACA 3, we got all the way to the final committee hearing before our bill was killed. This year, we are back more tenacious than ever to see ACA 8 passed. I implore everyone to reach out to your local representative and let them know that we as citizens of the state of California, we have the right to have this bill placed on the ballot, and for us as individual citizens to be able to vote on whether or not we want to continue to live in a state that allows legalized slavery and exploitation of human beings. With that, I want to thank you all again for your time in joining us here today. If you have any questions, comments, and or concerns, please feel free to email us. You can reach me directly at jamelia@abolishslavery.us. Please check out our website at abolishslavery.us. Also, I would like to give a quick shout out to our California Coalition, our primary bill author, Assembly Member Lori Wilson, who is also chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, all of our co-sponsors from the 10P program, A New Way of Life, Abolish Slavery National Network, ACLU California Action, Aging People in Prison Human Rights Campaign, All of Us or None, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Anti-Violence Safety and Accountability Project, Ascribe, Asian Prisoners Support Committee, California Lawyers for the Arts, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice, Edify, Freedom United, Glide Foundation, Homies Unodos, Impact Justice, Just Cities, Legal Aid at Work, Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, March On, NorCal Resist, Pride and Truth, Prison from the Inside Out, Represent Justice, Sister Warriors, Freedom Coalition, Starting Over Inc., The Love We Don't See, Time Done, Village Advocates, Youth Leadership Institute. Thank you all so very much for all of your hard work and dedication, and the fight must continue. Charmaine, would you mind closing us out with that Associated Press video again, please?
A hidden, intricate web links hundreds of popular food brands to work done by U.S. prisoners. A 2-year Associated Press investigation found that everything from grains, meat, eggs, and milk had been grown, harvested, or produced by incarcerated people. And their labor finds its way into the supply chains of some of the most recognized brands and largest food companies in the world. We followed as cattle raised at the Louisiana State Penitentiary were transported to a meat processor in Texas. From there, the beef ended up in the supply chains of McDonald's, Burger King, and major grocery stores.
I felt like I had become a slave, a product of the convict system, because everything that I was doing was profiting the prison.
The 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. We spoke to prisoners who were working on the same plantation soil where slaves toiled more than 150 years ago. Many were making pennies an hour. Some were getting nothing at all. Others were being contracted out to private companies or taking part in work release programs. Prisoners can sometimes be punished for refusing to work, even thrown into solitary confinement.
Because anytime you bump it,
And if they are hurt on the job, they often have little recourse.
They aren't eligible for workman's compensation, nor are they protected by other worker safety laws because they're not considered quote-unquote employees.
We're going to have to figure out different ways to make our system a better system instead of just exploiting labor and then calling it crime prevention.
The agriculture sector is just a fraction of the overall prison labor industry, which includes everything from public works to stamping license plates.
They're learning a skill set. They're learning to be responsible for something. They're learning to pay back their debt to society.
I learned that if I wanted to be better, I have to make my own way, basically. That the opportunities are here. They're not going to give them to me.
But prisons and corporations benefit from inmate labor. The goods wind up in the supply chains of giants like Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, and Costco, just to name a few. The AP also found American prison labor linked to the supply chains of multinational companies such as Cargill that export goods all over the world. This is happening even though Washington has banned imports and seized goods that were produced by prison or forced labor abroad.
And DHS is deeply concerned by credible and growing reports of China's state-sponsored use of forced labor and other human rights violations in the Xinjiang region.
Several companies told the AP they have policies in place restricting suppliers from using incarcerated workers. Cargill acknowledged buying goods from American prison farms and said it would determine next steps. Others said they would look into the AP's findings, which revealed just how much prison labor touches many of the foods we eat.